It is just hit.
Countdown.
Yeah, we do. Well, there's no countdown. Oh, I'll tell you right now, we are straight into it. Jack, it is time for the Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia. Malloy pressing the buttons, and there's so many buttons to press. Oh, we have in the studio the illustrious man who is in charge of this, as we know, because he has the computer. That makes you officially the man in charge. It's Derek Whitaker, whose show is, this is your show, mate, the Greater Wealth, sponsored by the wonderful people at
Blue Sky Factory.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you need some education when it comes to finances, I think you should get onto these people. I think they might know a thing or two. I think they might just change your life.
They might ruin you forever.
They could in a really positive way. If that works anyway. Out there in the never ever world, we have somewhere in the beautiful Northern Territory. In fact, Darwin, I'm pretty sure we have Shaq. Great to see you, mate. Really glad that you're part of the show tonight, or today, for that matter.
In beautiful Darwin. I'm not trying to turn my camera around, so I'll just have to do my best there, but there's Darwin.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think you got some rain coming, Shaq.
The rains are coming. So. Hey, that voice you just heard and that face you're looking at, well, sadly, it's Mr. Carter, the Shave Monkey himself. It's great to see you. It really is, Travis. All joking aside, mate. Ready for your insight today. Now I'm going to throw straight, of course, to Derek, because Derek, this is an unusual show.
Before you do, I just want to say one thing, if I can, for Aaron, just because I've got some clothes that are currently being hung up. Just have a look at these shirts. Aren't they absolutely?
No. Shit, I thought they were your underwear.
My underwear is much more colourful.
About the same size too.
Come on. I'm not starting the show with this level of jealousy. All right, I'm going to. Okay, I'm going to bring my wardrobe out next week. All right, what we're going to do now is sorry to Derek though, because this show is the Greater Wealth. Obviously, we do marry politics and the world of finance, and today we're going to do things a little bit differently because let's be honest, it's a pretty seismic few days.
It's been huge over the last few days, with of course the assassination attempt of Donald J. Trump in the United States. We've been looking at that, of course. It's tragic that the father passed away in that incident as well, with the bullets going astray there, and that there was a loss of life. I mean, people usually assume that the assassin got what he deserved and all that sort of stuff, but you got to remember this is someone's child, son. There's a mother, father involved in this sort of thing. So I don't want to make cheap of that. And it's not like a movie. This is reality, guys.
That's a really good point, actually, because we get rolled into it, don't we? And we sort of see it as a movie because we're watching it through our screens.
Speaking of movies, there was an interesting movie. I think it was called Arlington Road years ago. And it had a very interesting perspective. There was a professor on there saying that when the assassination attempt happens, the public wants to have the reassurance that everything they've got him, the bad guy, and that the world will go back to its normal state again. And it's interesting that kind of psychology that plays along with that. And I noticed that were pictures coming out very quickly. Some of them were inaccurate as well as to who had been the alleged assassin in this situation. So I think you got to be slow to point the finger.
Good. Very good point. And if you're going to point a finger rather, be very deliberate about it. All right. So today we're going to do things differently, as I say, and if you could give us a run through with that, that'd be great.
Let's do this. We're obviously going to talk a little bit. We've talked about this. We want to come back to this Trump story, which is huge. We need to consider the economic impact of what's going to happen, because what happens in the United States has an economic effect across the globe.
It does.
Being the biggest economy in the world. We do need to just cover one or two important stories that's happened recently as well, and then we'll come back to that story as well. Okay, so we'll spend the majority of time on the Trump issue.
I tend to think we've got a lot to say about that particular issue, but I do think you're right. I mean, this show is for everyday Australians very much, and those people around the world that are going to be touched by normal finance. So look, there's an issue with the Australians that we want to jump straight to.
For those in New South Wales, they're expecting a huge cut to the public sector. Now, this is interesting. The public sector is the biggest employer of people in New South Wales. It employs about 453,210 people as of 2023.
Sorry, how many, mate?
453,210 people in one state. And what they're saying is a tenth of people in New South Wales are employed in some capacity by the government. They're going to be taking the knife to that and cutting services from that, particularly starting with Service New South Wales, which are an organisation that really cover, your driver's license, redoing those registrations and all those kind of practical things. They're promising it will not disrupt services. What's interesting about what's interesting about the public service is that in the last 12 months, they have done an additional 17,265 people hired in that period.
Mhm.
So that's huge. It's increased its number of full-time roles since last year by 4.7% compared to 2022. The median salary paid is $95,984, so just under $96,000 to work in the public
Okay, for
service.
some.
So these job cuts will save a lot in
Mhm.
the as far as taxpayers are concerned.
Yep.
What I would expect is it's never nice when people lose their jobs.
Of course not.
But I think in terms of it may create new opportunities for people. A lot of people may hopefully start new businesses.
Sure.
And that's always great for an economy as well, rather than just be in
Look
the
at
public
you
service.
with the old glass is half full there. I look at I look at it from the point of view of I see how incredibly wasteful the public service is. It's ridiculous. And something also that might be a story behind this story is they might be reducing the public service, but maybe they're doing what they do here in Western Australia, which is quite disgusting as far as I'm concerned, and certainly also on a federal level, is they fire people and they drop the numbers on the public service, but then they hire out private companies to do the exact same work. This way they can reduce the cost because they can hire them on a much lower rate, and of course they can fire them very easily too. So a lot of people who would have been employed in that public service, right, will now be offered jobs in private entities that will pay them much less and take away a lot of their entitlements.
If you have a contractor, you don't have to pay the superannuation, and so that saves you. And that, of course, superannuation has gone up.
It has.
So
it has.
Something else on that one as well. So as you guys are probably aware, Luan, my wife, is Vietnamese. So there
Have
are
noticed that
g'day,
yet?
Josh. So we're in the process of trying.
Josh.
Obviously, we've had a tragedy in the family. We're trying to get one of her family members over to WA. Guess where her visa application is processed?
Oh,
New
China.
South Wales. Well,
China.
what?
Yeah,
Okay.
China. So my question is, how many of these jobs for services, especially if it's just like data entry and stuff like that, is the New South Wales government going to be offshoring any of these jobs? Bet you they haven't answered that one, have they?
All of them, I would tend to suggest. Look, I'm interested in seeing Josh's opinion on this. Really, he's always bang on the money. This one. If you've got some thoughts there, mate, bring that through. And obviously, anybody, and we see some people joining all the time, so jump on board if you've got a comment or a question. Now, Shaq's just re-entered the room. Shaq, well, basically, I'll throw it at you to Derek. Actually, Derek, if you want to reiterate sort of what you were just saying,
I heard the comments about New South Wales. Look, I'll just say this. I think many of us are worried about the bloating of bureaucracies and the bloating of government spending, and it's not necessarily a bad thing to see them reducing the amount of staff they have if it's going to lead to better efficiency. Sure. I will say though, in relation to Service New South Wales, and it's something that I've said it since I first interacted with them, and I just thought, my goodness, I can't believe I'm going to say it. I actually have had really pleasant experiences with them, especially when I compare Service New South Wales insofar as driver's licenses are concerned to their predecessor, the RTA. Very, very efficient. I've never had a bad experience dealing with them. Very friendly staff when you go into the centres. When you ring them, you're not on hold for 2 hours, and the staff that you're talking to are very friendly. And even if you have a fine or something like that, you call them. They're very, very nice people. Like they're almost apologetic. Yeah, look, sorry, buddy. Yeah, you went through a speeding camera or whatever. So I really don't have anything bad to say about Service New South Wales, and I've actually always been very impressed with the New South Wales state government and its agencies, to be perfectly honest. I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're certainly a massive improvement. I think that under Gladys Berejiklian, there was certainly a lot more responsiveness to what the people actually wanted. So.
Right. I mean, I certainly can't say the same about the West Australian counterparts. They could not be any more inefficient, incompetent, and quite frankly, what's the word I'm using? I'd like to use here. Rude and obnoxious will do. I'll clean it up.
And look, I agree with you. And even during COVID, when I flew to Melbourne, I flew to Queensland, and I had to interact with their equivalent sort of government departments. You had to get the app and the this and the that. New South Wales's app was just so easy to use. It was very intuitive. It was done brilliantly. Everyone else is West Australia, Victoria, and Queensland were the three other states I travelled to, and it was just not the same quality as New South Wales, in my personal opinion.
Now, Josh's comment there that he's a bit worrying, finds it a bit worrying that China is handling Aussie visa applications. Now, I thoroughly agree with that because, again, we're talking about private information. We're talking about sending, I mean, come on, we are sending private information to a communist country that, let's be frank, is not overly friendly with us, and that slaps us across the hands, you know, when it comes to, I don't know, everything from lobster imports to, well, wine or whatever, that if we don't toe the line with them, they come after us financially. That's political power that's being used financially. So, yeah, I have a big issue with Australian security being farmed out to other nations. You know what? Australians can look after our own information.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, was there a bit of the show that I missed? Is there a bit of the show that I missed? What's Josh talking about that China is handling Australian visa applications?
No, so Shaq, what's happened is Luan's trying to get her family members over here, and the people who are processing her visa for her family members are actually based in China. So what I'm saying, the question was, how many of these ACTS jobs in New South Wales are going to be repurposed and offshored?
Mm-hmm.
So back in the day, like sort of 15, 20 years ago, I actually briefly worked for Telstra, believe it or not. Don't even get me started, but I briefly worked at Telstra, and I worked for small business complaints, and we used to handle the overflow for normal complaints. And when I was asked at barbecue, so where do you work? I was like trying to think of something I could say other than I work for Telstra, because the last thing you want to do is tell somebody you work for Telstra and then tell them you work for complaints.
You'd rather say you're
but yeah, anyway, at that time, people were making I think I froze it. Have you guys still got me?
No, we can hear you.
Yeah, good.
Okay. So at that time, there was a lot of talk in the federal government about, you're going to be on screen if you come any closer. At that time, there was a lot of talk about jobs leaving Australia and encouraging these big companies to keep the jobs here. And Australia Post, what happens, or what used to happen, is when you sent a letter, if the machine couldn't read the letter, it would go through 3 times, and then if it couldn't read the letter, it would take a photograph of it, and it would send it to a centre, which at the time was up in Ryde in New South Wales, and they would look through the computer screen, and then they would sort of direct the letter. And those jobs, which obviously an Australian government-owned corporation, those jobs was shipped offshore. So in Parliament question and answer time one day, from the way I remember it, was that one of the ministers was having a crack at another minister for jobs leaving Australia, and that minister quipped back and said, well, talk to us about the Australian Post jobs, which is under your portfolio. So, I think visa applications being processed offshore is, whether it be China or anywhere else, is a little bit concerning.
I agree.
Yep. But so just going back to how shit the governments are, whether it's Australian, New South Wales state government, or WA state government. So that great app you're saying about in New South Wales, so 3.8 million documents relating to 186,000 customers was lost through the COVID app in 2020. So this is during the peak of all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, the app might be good. The people handling it are shithouse.
Okay, Derek.
Well, if they weren't shithouse, they'd work for private corporations and not the government, right? but I do hope. But I will say, I do hope that when we're talking about reducing government staff, I mean, Derek said a lot of those staff come from Surface New South Wales, but I hope we're not going to be losing nurses and doctors and bus drivers, and I mean, there's a lot of other people that work for government that we actually need. So
yeah.
Very true.
Can you imagine if you're going to the doctor then getting a flight to like Thailand to go see him because of offshore doctors?
Oh, it's probably coming.
Well, we tell it. No, but you know what? That's not actually. But that's actually not so far from the truth, because now they're talking about telehealth services being provided. I think it's only a matter of time before you will actually. For a lot of ailments, instead of actually going to the GP, you go to telehealth. And if you're going to go to a telehealth, which is essentially a Zoom conference, why not have them in another country?
You could fly.
It's only a matter of time before that happens.
the time you're waiting in the emergency at the moment. I was speaking to someone recently, an elderly lady who was waiting like near on 24 hours. Okay, so you could fly to Thailand, get yourself fixed up, and get on a flight back home.
It was my mother.
Right.
Yeah, my mother, 22 hours in emergency, 13 hours just on the hard chairs in the waiting room.
Sure.
To see someone, and I thought to myself, gosh, from Perth to LA, I could have done that trip.
Well, there you go. I wasn't even talking about your mum. I'm talking about somebody else. So there you go. There's two examples right there.
Yeah,
there you go.
It's bad. Now, speaking of China, it's been interesting over the last week. We're going to get, of course, to the big breaking story in a moment.
We will.
Of course, what's happening in the United States. But China, in the past week, they've had a huge bank fails that have gone on, a banking catastrophe, some have called it. 40 banks have failed and have been absorbed by other banks, and depositors were storming the bank trying to demand to get their money back. This is huge. In just 1 week, 40 banks disappearing into larger institutions, and depositors were out there. Big problem, they're saying a lot of it is the property sector. 55 trillion yuan, which is about 7.5 trillion in assets. These troubled institutions have had those kind of assets. That's 13% of the total banking system. And they reckon that area has been mismanaged, with bad loans just occurring, many of those to real estate developers, local governments. And some have revealed that 40% of the books are made of non-performing loans. So that's not going to disappear quickly.
Not quickly.
If you've got that kind of problem in the underbelly of what's going on in the economy, it's raised its ugly head. And watch that space. You see the ripple effect of what's going on, properties sectors going on. Now it's affecting, of course, the banking sector and, of course, everyday Chinese.
Now, Travis, you were making the point earlier, just before we were to air, we had a quick sort of discussion about a few things, just as we do, and you were saying that, to sort of, if you can clarify the situation, what's different about, Australia and our banking system to the Chinese and the quantity of banks.
Yeah, so in Australia, we effectively have the big four banks, and then we get a few credit unions like Bendigo. I don't even think
Police
credit
and
union
nurses
is still around. Police and nurses,
Right,
there's a few others. So really, you out of stretch, you'd probably say you've got maybe 6 or 7 real banks that people can use. So in China, you'll have HSBC, like all the big major banks as well in the main cities. But each of the regional towns, or whatever the Chinese version of it is. Which one is it, Jack? Jack's a lot more into finance than I am.
HSBC, it's an interesting one because it's the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation. So you would think it's a Chinese bank, but it's actually a British bank, because remember that Britain actually had the lease over Hong Kong for all that time.
Pre-96.
So you've got a couple of major ones. You've got I don't know if this is allowed for the normal people to use, the People's Bank of China. You've got the HSBC, which apparently is based out of England. But each of the towns, like the regional towns, will have their own in-house banks. So there's actually thousands of banks in China. So this has kind of been a snowball from a previous event as well, where one of the branch managers, I'm just hunting down the article for it so I can show you, he transferred, I think it's to America, $9 billion out of some of these smaller banks, which were the cash deposits from all the farmers and everything like that. So in China, if you have a low interest savings account, the government guarantees your money. But if you have a high interest savings account, the government doesn't. So what a lot of these small banks were doing, they were taking the money from illegally, without their consent, out of their low safe accounts and putting them into the high interest accounts to get a lot more customers. So they could say, yeah, our low rate is higher than the others. And then this guy took all that money, and we're talking $9 billion US, sent it offshore, then fled the country. Wow. So all these like little small banks started falling over, and then all the mortgages started falling over, all the building companies started falling over, and it had like a mini snowball effect. And then they sort of like righted it. The government stepped in and said, no, we will guarantee all these banks. And then it looks like it was just a band-aid solution to get through that news cycle. And looks like it's happening again, and the major banks are taking over again.
Look, I often say about, well, why do we care about the US? We care about the US because so many other reasons, but certainly financially, if the US gets the sniffles, Australia gets the flu, right? So, and not the Wu flu. I'm not particularly talking about that one, just the regular one. When we are so tied to China, okay, financially, that this is a big issue. If China fails, Australia, I mean, my word, how much of our economy is tied up in that? So,
well, they have bought a lot of our iron ore in the past, and I think that's the thing that Australia kind of woke up to is we've got to start diversifying here. And you could see, of course, when Brexit occurred, that Australia was in a hurry to do some deals with the UK.
Yes.
And why not?
Why not indeed?
Many values that are in common.
If I can jump in on a couple of things, so I'll respond to this comment in a minute. So just to Travis's point, look, we have building societies, credit unions, mutual banks, things like that here in Australia. And look, I'm a big believer in those. Unfortunately, I've got accounts with the major 4 banks because of some of the extra services they offer. But I don't actually have much of my money with them. I tend to put most of my day-to-day money into those credit unions and mutual funds because I like to support them. Big difference between them, obviously, is that the big banks are owned by shareholders. The credit unions and mutual societies and things like that are actually member-owned organisations. So, I prefer to support community-based initiatives. I think the idea that, hey, you could have the Bank of Mirrabooka, the Bank of Sterling, the Bank of Dalkeith, etc., for the people that live in those areas, to try and use the example of China. It's not actually that bad an idea because, look, the people the people that live in Dalkeith may not have the same understanding of the business requirements for someone in Kelmscott or Mirrabooka or Joondalup, right? So why not let them have more local people dealing with their stuff? The idea that small banks were trying to transfer the funds into other types of environments where they could make a spread between what they're paying their customers and what they're receiving is not unreasonable. I don't think it's unreasonable for them to try to transfer some of that money overseas because they feel like the currency will be stronger and they'll get better returns. I'm suspecting that something's gone wrong and the guy's gone right. I'm out of here before I get in trouble. So I don't have too much of an issue with that.
He did get caught, by the way.
Yeah, the instability in China is having. Yeah, of course it did. The instability in the Chinese banking sector is causing a problem in China, and I think we're going to feel the effects of it around the world. And I think that we really have to improve and increase the relationship with our natural allies, such as the United States. I won't talk more about the US because obviously we're going to have a lot of things to say about that in a minute. To the comment that came in, well, what about different laws in relation to prescriptions? Yes, that'll take some time. But what I'm saying is, I know that a couple of countries, for example, the US and Canada, their telehealth services now, there's talk about them being able to prescribe across the border. It would make sense, for example, for Australian doctors to be able to give prescriptions to somebody in New Zealand. So I think it's only a matter of time before people will be able to say, hey, I'm a doctor and I'm in whatever country. I'm going to get the accreditation to be able to take patients from Australia. And, that I think would be a fairly simple process. So I'm not saying it'll happen overnight, but hey, if all I want is a prescription for ibuprofen, for example, I often have to get ibuprofen because I get a lot of swelling in my leg because I've got an issue with my ankle. And so something like that, it's not really a drug of addiction. It's not something that's particularly serious. So if I wanted something like that, I think a doctor, in other parts of the world would be easily able to give me that prescription. And instead of me paying $70 and getting $35 back from Medicare, I could pay like $20 and get nothing back from Medicare, but it would still be cheaper. That's the sort of thing that I'm suggesting is likely to happen.
Okay.
Again, look, I'm not saying I'm supporting this or I'm not supporting it. I'm just saying I think that's a direction that we're heading in.
That's all right, mate. Nice fence. Is it sticking in your butt? Because it must be painful. No, look.
I've been learning from Anthony Albanese.
Well, yes, quite the thespian. Or other letters very similar. Anyway, I want to go to and talk about the big issue here. Okay, let's be absolutely frank. This is world changing. This is something that we have to talk about, and we have talked about elsewhere, and we'll be talking about later on Freedom Friday.
Why? What happened?
Nothing, mate. Nothing happened. I'll throw to Derek on this one. Let's get into it, mate. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. And quite frankly,
can I do it? So please. The big news is the Simpsons got it wrong. He didn't die.
No.
Oh, Travis. Okay, for those of you who have not been we were socially disconnected for a while, which is always
Yes.
nice to do.
It is really nice.
With everything
Yeah.
that's going on. Obviously, there was an assassination attempt upon Donald Trump over the weekend, and resulting in the death of 2 people. Not only the assassin, but of course someone in the crowd as well,
Really
who was
sad.
trying to
Unbelievably
protect
so.
his daughters at that thing. It's very interesting. There's a lot of scrutiny going on in terms of how this affects, the whole political race that is coming up in November.
Yep.
Why do we bring this up on an economic show? Because politics is so tied into
Of course it is.
economies.
Yeah.
I'll touch on the economics in a minute, but let's talk about the politics in a moment. For the moment, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because obviously the Democrats have had a huge issue in lead up to this because of that debate has
Yes.
been dividing them all over the shop.
But hang on, the follow-up interview with old Stephanopoulos or whatever, the guy from Sesame Street, when that follow-up interview was done, that was going to clear everything up, mate. It was going to. He just had a bad day. He had jet lag from 10 days before. I mean, come on, let's use these excuses. And he absolutely failed in that interview. He looked like a great fool once again. And even the far left, the NBCs, the MSNBCs, the CNNs, all of that, even they have turned on him. It is time to turn him over. He's he is on his deathbed, and what we're seeing is elderly abuse, right? It is time to move on. But to see this and the rhetoric that's come from the left, in my mind, has been a catalyst for this violence, for this attack on Donald
Well,
Trump.
up to this point, Trump was playing it very quiet.
He
Why
was.
wouldn't you? Because they're imploding on themselves and destroying themselves, or being so divided in the public space.
Correct.
As far as the Democrats are concerned. And now, of course, this has occurred where within 130 to 150 yards from a building, this assassin climbed the building. There was reports that he was seen climbing that building with a rifle. And people were pointing that out to the police around that area. I mean, that is not a very far distance from the podium itself.
No,
in terms of riflemanship and taking a shot. They're easily, assassins have been known to take professional assassins to be able to hit the target from 2 kilometers away. So
absolutely
150 yards is nothing in that sense. The Secret Service, of course, are going to be reviewed in terms of what they did, what they didn't do, of course, as you would in any incident like this.
Of course.
Their priority should be to get the target out as quickly and efficiently as possible. And of course, there's other footage that has emerged where there are shots of the sniper protecting the president at that point.
Of course.
Aiming the other direction and seeing their response to the gunshots that were fired. So it's very interesting, the reviews that have come out in this. From an economic point of view, immediately as soon as the shots rang out, heard across the globe, as they're putting it, the Donald Trump meme coin went through the roof in terms of its numbers. So it'll be interesting to see how that comes out.
What kind of growth are we talking about?
In relation to,
sorry to put you on the spot there.
That's okay. Let me get the chart up. It went from about $8.07 to about $10.15 in a matter of hours.
So 20% basically jump.
Yeah, it was a lot for a crypto coin to do that. And of course, it's going to be interesting. Crypto trades 24 hours. So over the weekend, that plays out. The market's not opening. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the Truth Social stock tonight as that opens on the stock market as well. And you're seeing a pouring of money going in to, of course, support the victims of this plight, people who were injured in the shooting and the family who lost their dad, basically. So it's been good to see people get behind that.
It is. It really is. I mean, and get behind this man who is, you're right. I mean, he is protecting his daughter or daughters. I'm not really sure. I certainly know one. This man is like any dad, okay, is a hero to look after his children like that. So
what's been interesting is what's going to be etched in the minds of Americans is that image of Donald Trump standing up on the stage after being shot with his hand in the air, the US flag behind him waving and saying, "Fight, fight, fight." That is going to be etched into history. That's a iconic symbol now.
I'm wearing right now the T-shirt of the mugshot of Donald J. Trump, right, which I wear with great pride because several things. Like I've made it very clear many times, I was not a big fan. In fact, I was quite against him going into power in 2016. But I saw what he did, and I've seen the man that has become, but certainly in a public persona he's definitely become. And I was wrong. and I'm willing to wear that. And to see the lawfare against him and see the complete corruption of the left that's taken place. So to see now that other image of him defiantly fist in the air, that is etched into even, well, American folklore, obviously, but world history. We're going to see that image forever. This is going straight to the history books.
What's interesting is that in how many Americans' mind now, it's a done deal now. As
It
far
is a
as
done
we're
deal.
voting for Trump. Shaq had an interesting perspective on a previous discussion that we had. I'll throw over to you, Shaq, in terms of how many Americans may not that are Democrats may not come to the voting booth on the day that the polls are happening.
I thought you thought my interesting perspective was we've been encouraging youth to be more involved in politics, but this wasn't quite what we would have had in mind. No, look, I've been talking to a lot of my friends in the United States, and just at the outset, I'll just say I'm not a conservative. I've never said that I am, but I'm not a progressive, right? I sort of sit centre right on a lot of things. I have a lot of friends that are on the left. The reason why that I'm like that is because I don't like a lot of regulations because of my advocacy for small businesses, but I also recognise that people, are struggling as mere mortals and they need a little bit of assistance sometimes. So I've got friends that are Democrats, I've got friends that are Republicans, and I've had a lot of friends of mine who are on the Republican side that get along really well with their neighbours, but the neighbours are Democrats and the neighbours are, going to vote for Biden, who've actually taken their signs down from their front yard because they just can't do it. And what they've been saying to the neighbours is, look, I just don't have it in me anymore. I don't have the heart to vote for Trump. I'm just not going to show up to the vote at all. And remember, because they don't have to vote in the United States. So I think that's what you're going to see. I think you'll see a slight uptick in people that are going to vote for Trump. I think that if you have a look at what happened after he got convicted in New York, all of the Republicans, including some of those like Lincoln Project Republicans and Never Trumpers, people like Mitt Romney, immediately just said, that's it. I'm supporting Donald Trump because what happened was an abuse of the legal system. And I think now that you've seen this man that they've tried to stop him in every conceivable way. Tucker Carlson's said before that if they run out of options, they'll try and assassinate him. And look at what's happened.
Out of options.
So I think a lot of people have just said, like, here's a man who has, he's been attacked in the media. He's been attacked. They've tried to, they tried to some states tried to remove him from the ballot or pass laws that would prevent him from being on the ballot, even if he got the nomination for the Republican Party. Like, it's just been all of these underhanded techniques, and then all of a sudden, this happens. And I think what that does is it means that every person who's a Republican is going to be out to vote. You're going to see a really high Republican turnout. I just don't think you're going to see a particularly high Democrat turnout in this election. And I think as a result, there's a real possibility that he could actually take some states that we never would have expected. I mean, at the moment, he's just taken the lead in New Jersey. He's just taken the lead in Virginia, right? Illinois, which is where Chicago is, looks like it's in play. New York looks like it could flip. I don't think it will, but it could. Hawaii looks like it could flip. I mean, Minnesota. Like, you're talking about places that have just never flipped before. And the thing is that also, like, when he went and did that big rally in the Bronx, who does that? Do you know what I mean? Like, you've never seen Republicans go to those areas where they're not well liked. Donald Trump went there and said, "Hey, I'm from here." So I think that this could be a real landslide. I think that could really happen. Just as a very quick side note, just because we had a question come in from one of the audience members, I'm not saying what will happen because I don't fully know. I just know what some of the proposals are. What I'd be suggesting is that if it's a foreign doctor, for example, a doctor in the United States, who was accredited here to be able to provide telehealth consultations, they would be able to give you a prescription and send it to you, and that prescription be valid because they've got the accreditation in Australia. So that's just an example. The exact workings of how that would work, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but that's some of the proposals that has been looked at, and I think it's only a matter of time before we end up being in that position. Back to Trump.
Shaq, I really appreciate the fact you just did that. Travis, just if I Travis, if I may, look, this is a big part of what Edge is about. Okay, we are very interactive, so I really appreciate the fact you've just answered that. There was also a comment that was up there earlier about the footage of the shot, and you can actually see it whisk through the air and that sort of thing. If you could find that comment, that'd be great, Travis, and bring that up on the screen. I think, look, everybody's got a lot of theories. Some are going to be right, some are going to be wrong, but the ultimate thing about free speech is you've got the right to say it, and you've got the right to say it here on Edge, and you won't be edited out. That's for sure. We don't do that sense.
And you should, like, I don't want to put it this way, but you shouldn't have an Edge being the only place where you should be able to have free speech. You should be able to say whatever you want to say. That's the problem, and it's a big problem in the United States, with the cancel culture, all that sort of stuff, right?
Yep.
I've said things on this network that you guys don't actually agree with, right? And I have very liberal positions on things like legalizing drugs and a whole heap of other things, right? And I don't really think I'm on the left, but maybe on some things I am. None of you guys say, look, Shaquille, we're not ever going to have dinner with you again. We're not going to have a beer with you because you have a position that we don't hold. We have great conversations. Everybody who's on the left thinks that I'm a hard right winger, but some of them will actually say to me, look, you're too far to the right. I don't really want to associate with you right now. I'm like, well, go get stuff, mate. Like, what the hell? It just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. This kind of goes back to the fact that, okay, if what had happened to Trump had happened to someone on the left, okay, a left politician, right now there'd be rioting, there'd be bricks through windows, there'd be looting, all that. That's the reality of it, right? That's what would be happening.
Yeah.
We could have that conversation. We could have whatever conversation. Shaq, like, we can disagree. The center and the center right, we could have that sort of discussion, and we can actually argue about things, walk away, and still be friends. Something we used to do as Australians, as Americans. This is something we did because, quite frankly, we were, I don't know, kind of the sum of our ethics. We understood that you grow as a person, that if you actually hear different opinions, if you are just in a bubble and you hear nothing but the contents of that bubble, you can become radicalized, okay? Or you can just become so censored into submission, right? And I think that certainly over the last 3 years in Australia, we've been censored into submission, a lot of the population. So no, we will always, whether I disagree with you or agree with you, Shaq, the fact of the matter is, obviously, you're always going to be welcome on the show because we want differing opinions, right?
Well, thank you very much. I'm getting the fence out of my ass now, shall I?
So, guys, I just want to quickly do something.
On you, but
Sorry, before you do, Travis, just very quickly. So Josh made a comment. It's not going to be Biden. It's going to be Harris. In a weird kind of way, I actually think that this has helped Biden. I don't think it's helped the Democrats. I think it's actually helped Biden. I think that all the attention's now come off Biden in relation to he is, he's too old, he's too feeble, blah blah blah. I think this is kind of a done deal now. I think it's going to be Trump Biden. And quite frankly, I think the Democrats really should have been like on this right away. Either you're going to replace him or you're not. The longer that's gone on, the more that people have lost faith in the Democrat Party. But I think that because of the fact that the news cycle is going to be dominated for the next few weeks, I would say, about this assassination and who is the guy that pulled the trigger. I don't normally mention their names, but it's kind of funny that his surname is Crooks. But anyway, so I think that there's some videos that look like it's him where he says, "This is my name, and I hate the Republicans and I hate Trump," and all that sort of stuff. So the post-mortems and the investigation about whether the Secret Service and the other security services didn't do what they should have done and all that, that's going to dominate the cycle. Don't forget that early voting opens in the US in just over 60 days. So I think with the lack of attention on Biden from here on in, I think it's pretty much a done deal that Biden will take the nomination at the DNC. And also, guys, remember that the RNC is starting today, American time. So Donald Trump will have that nomination in the next few days.
I made the comment last week.
Sorry, I've got to jump in here. So Taz from Twitter. Sorry, not Twitter, Twitch. So that's a gaming online streaming platform. We stream to there as well. She's actually sent us a video. So I'm just going to quickly bring it in. This is actually the senior photographer from the New York's Time who actually captured all these videos. So I just want to quickly play it and do a reaction to this. So check this out.
It happened so fast, but now I can see it all in slow motion. I never thought I'd ever see an assassination attempt on the president and to be there to photograph it. My name is Doug Mills. I've been covering politics since 1983, and I was yesterday covering President Trump's rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. I was taking pictures, and that's when the pops started happening. And I just happened to have my finger on the shutter, and I heard the pops and just kept shooting. I didn't know what I had captured, but when I got to my laptop, I could see that bullet flying behind his head because it's definitely not in the frames right before it. And it's not in afterwards. It's only that one frame. And I was shooting in 8,000th of a second. It captured that streak behind him. I covered the president for 40 plus years, and I always know which way they come on stage and which way they go off. And the closest stairs were to my right. So I ran over to that side and witnessed him being helped up to his feet. And my immediate reaction was, oh my God, he's alive. And then all of a sudden, he got near the edge of the stage and raised up his fist in defiant, and I could see the blood on his face then. That defiant went away like in a split second, and he became very serious. I thought he looked very pale. Two very different moments happened, in a matter of seconds. It is a moment that is unlike any in my lifetime, my history, my job of covering the White House since 1983. You never think about something like this ever happening because it's so frightening.
So
Yeah, it actually
holy
it kind of
shit.
looks a little bit funny because it kind of looks a little bit funny because when the first shot you've got the bullet coming, and the second shot you've got here after he's grabbed his ear, you've got his hand like that. It looks like he caught the bullet like something out of the Matrix. You just look at those first two shots. The other really iconic moment is when he's putting a twist up. He's got all these Secret Service guys there, but the American flag is actually hanging from above. So because of the way the photo was taken, it actually looks like the American flag's upside down.
Oh, really?
And I just thought that was, I'm not sure if it's in there in that collage that you just put up, but I'll send it to you guys after we get off air. And yeah, I thought that was a really sort of telling kind of situation, because if that bullet actually had have been a few centimeters over and caused serious damage or death to former President Trump, I know this has been said by everybody, but I tend to agree that this could have caused so much turmoil. It would resemble something like a civil war. The amount of instability that you would get in the US if that happened.
The irony,
I still think it might end up that way.
The pictures in the background of people who were at the rally.
Yes.
A lot of them are holding the sign "You're fired." And
I know.
Irony was just
I saw the exact same thing. I thought your timing could not be worse. I mean, look, when you've got Biden saying put a bullseye on him, right?
Yeah.
And you hang on. Isn't Trump the guy who's accused of inciting violence?
Yeah.
Woo, right?
Yeah, January
like
6th.
this just drives. I know this just drives me nuts.
Can you imagine him shooting a new campaign ad, and the guy behind the camera is like, "Okay, 3, 2, 1, shoot!" Like, no, don't say it like that.
So you can take all the Matrix memes and just see Trump start doing the Neo thing behind it.
Already seen it.
Yep.
Hey, look, just quick.
I haven't seen that. You have to show me. I haven't seen those.
Oh, definitely. More people jumping online. Hello, Damo. Great to see you, mate. Apparently, you found us on Twitch. What a fantastic fella. And I cannot actually read the name of the person who's making some comments there, but I've said,
it's Taz.
I have no idea. Oh, well, there you go. Okay, have no idea how many Trump Matrix videos are out there, or memes rather. So true. And great to see you there as well, Tash. Really love your insight. Really do. This is just, look, to me, this is, like I said it before, it's a JFK moment in our lives.
Well, in terms of economics, yes, it is. And in terms of economics, we made the comment last week that a lot of the nations are already starting to plot, assuming that Trump gets in, how's that going to affect our foreign policy?
Sure.
Can you imagine what they're saying now in those round tables in different nations? It's like almost, this is a done deal. Assume that Trump's going to now be the president.
Yep.
Where does that situate us in terms of politics? Where does it situate us in terms of economies? It's going to have a very big ripple effect across the globe.
It will. And, we need to, be aware of this, see the opportunities and also the dangers as they appear.
And how is the man characterized in terms of his change of his personality? Because he was tough before, from 2016 onwards. Now look what he's gone through, what he's had to endure in terms of lawfare, in terms of a bullet. This guy is coming back. Look out. He will not be messing if he gets that.
Again,
what will be interesting?
What people have been saying, Sorry.
What I wanted to say.
What people have been.
Shaq, go.
I'll go to you. Go to you. Billy.
All right, go for it there.
I've
Derek.
lost my train of thought now. Go for it, Shaq.
Sorry. You paused, so I thought you'd finish, and then you kept talking. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What people in the US have been saying to me that are actually on the Republican side is that after the debate, they could finally have reasonable, rational conversations with people where it wasn't gaslighting, where it wasn't, no, Biden's not old. You guys are just using cheap fakes. He didn't stumble over his words, etc. They could finally have conversations. What I've heard since the weekend is finally we can actually openly say that we're Trump supporters, where before we were too afraid to say anything. And I think that carries a lot. And I think that kind of momentum is going to be unstoppable in the US. I think it's really clear that he's going to win. As I said before, about he's leading in all 7 of the swing states. There's a realistic potential that he could turn a couple of deep blue states over to him. So, yeah, I think that this is a done deal. I don't think it matters. I don't think it would matter who you put in to replace Biden if you were going to replace him. I just don't think it makes a difference. I think Trump's got this.
Hands down, absolutely. And if he
fantastic.
doesn't, it will be civil war.
Yeah, I was for
That's how far I think this has gone beyond a joke now. It's just insane what they're trying to do, and even the coverage. So the fundraiser for the 2 guys that died and all that sort of stuff. Try and find them on Google. They're all being censored out. So this is like the extent they're trying to go to try and limit how much this has helped Trump, the assassination attempt, is insane. So I think if there's all of a sudden another magical, it's like you watch the votings at the last election, it was like going up, then all of a sudden just spiked for Biden, but no one else. So if something like that happens again at this election, I think it will genuinely be a civil war.
So he has won the heart of the people at this point, because the people are saying they have gone too far. What will happen? This was what I was going to say beforehand. I just come back to me. What will happen when he gets the presidency, when he's in power? Where does that sit him in relation to, will he get further opposition or will he get rid of the opposition? And I think this will certainly change the projection of where the United States goes economically, politically, economically, and socially as well. That's going to be interesting. The second card that he plays, what else is up the sleeve there that he's been planning? We know he's got issues in terms of Europe wanting to end that war. You know he's going to have an opinion on Taiwan and China, of course, and where that goes in the sovereignty of Taiwan. You know he's going to have issues on where Russia is in the mix and the BRICS nations as well. We've seen him play his hand in terms of, we want the United States to be leaders in the crypto space. That's particularly so in terms of the warfare that's going on. De-dollarizing the US dollar, and going there. So it's going to be really interesting how this plays out after the November.
Thoroughly agree. I see a comment there. This is the end of the Nuremberg regime. Ain't that the fact? Like, to me,
I'll say that he is likely. The Republicans are likely to take control of both chambers of Congress, the House of Reps and the Senate, and I think by significant margins, actually. And the Democrats, I've been saying prior to the assassination attempt, I've been saying what the Democrats ought to be focusing on is the House and the Senate, because they're going to end up losing the whole bloody lot. They haven't done that. So I think the Republicans will control everything, which means that Trump has the ability to be able to do a lot of things, and he doesn't have to worry about the next election because he can't contest it in the first place. So that's a very interesting and unique position for him to be in. I think that you will start to see more trust in the US dollar as he seeks to increase some of the lack of trust that's been developed over the last 20, 30 years or so. I also think from all accounts, I know people that have worked with him at the White House who'll say to me that what he'll actually do is he'll actually call people from different sides of each issue to come in and talk to him so he can actually hear all of the information and then make a decision based on what he thinks. So as far as international trade's concerned, I wouldn't be surprised to find out that he's bringing people from all over the world to encourage that international trade, to tell them what some of the roadblocks are so that he could fix them. So I think that will be great. To be fair to Biden and his administration, Biden has tried to improve relationships with the international community. I think that the concern is that the way that he's tried to do that is by doing much of the same as what's been done in the past. Whereas what Trump is doing is, this is an America First idea. We want to make sure that we're not being taken advantage of. And there's a difference between that and just acquiescing to unfair and unreasonable demands from Europe, for example. And you know what? I'm British, as everyone knows. NATO. Why shouldn't the European Union countries be contributing a certain percentage of their GDP into supporting NATO? I think that Donald Trump, there are some issues I don't really agree with him on, but on that particular issue, the funding of NATO, was that not unreasonable for him to say to Germany, one, pay up, and two, don't buy oil from Russia and then tell us that we're supposed to protect you from Russia? No, it's not on. I thought that was perfectly reasonable.
Look, Shaq, I've got a far better idea. Throw the whole concept of NATO exactly where it belongs, in the bin. It is over. That is the politics of neon 80 years ago, and it is not relevant. And quite frankly, NATO has just become a warmonger by whoever funds it, and that's what's been happening with Biden. This is a proxy war with Russia that we're using the Ukraine as not we, the Americans, and certainly the American government actually specifically are using this whole NATO thing as a way of fighting Putin, which is just about regime change to economically benefit the US. It's an absolute load.
And I'm not going to say anything in support of Putin, because I don't support him, and I certainly don't support what's happened over there. And I'm not an expert in this field, so maybe I'm talking out of school. But I do think that it's worth noting that Putin didn't just wake up one day and say, "Oh, I'm going to go into the Ukraine." Right? He actually brought up issues with what was happening in eastern Ukraine for at least 10 years that I'm aware of. He brought it up at the United Nations. He brought it up in the European Parliament. He's talked about the issues and what he thinks are problems with human rights abuses, etc. He's talked about that for such a long period of time, and then finally he went and did something about it. So for him to be chastised all over the world, and I remember when this first happened, I kept asking everybody, why are we not hearing from him? Why are we not hearing what it is that he says he wants and why he went in there? There was a complete media blackout on that. And as soon as there's a media blackout on information, I always go, why? Why aren't they telling me what I want to know? Why aren't they telling me all the details?
I was speaking to a Russian friend of mine just the other day, and she was telling me about her life in Russia, up until 1999 when they left, which subsequently is actually the time that obviously Putin came to power. And there was drive-by shootings as a daily thing in their area. There were drugs, there were dead people in the street. It basically kind of looked like what San Francisco looks like today in a lot of ways, okay? It was just a rotting, because, the fall of the Soviet Union, it was a terrible mess. I don't know enough about Putin, but I know this. I know that in the time he's been in there, I know that the Russian people, the bulk of the Russian people, believe in him, because he actually saved that country and cleaned it up and all those things. And the fact that she lived in a complete state of terror, right? And her mother had to work ridiculous hours, all that kind of stuff. It was just a horrible, horrible place to be once the Iron Curtain had fallen, okay? And Putin has made those changes. When I see that Putin has been making attempts first before the actual war started to actually prevent the war, since the war has been there in Ukraine, to actually stop the war, and the person that has stopped it, the entity that has stopped it is the US government. The US government have been pouring this money in and have been controlling it. And I'm not saying it's Biden, because Biden, as we all know, it's weekend at Biden's. He's being held up. The actual war criminal, in my eyes, is the same man that started more wars and killed more people than you can poke a stick at, but started more wars and started more conflicts than anyone, and that is Obama. We are just seeing a third term of Obama. That's my opinion. Now, the show's almost over. We only got a couple of minutes to go, so I'll throw back to Derek once I've just had my little statement.
I'd like to say the same thing as well that I said on our other show, if you don't mind. So just leave me enough time to do that, please.
Okay, no problem.
Why don't you do it now, Shaq? Go for it.
All right, yeah. So I do want to very just quickly say I went to the Royal Flying Doctors service here in Darwin, so I bought that shirt. Went out afterwards on a dinner cruise, and I was saying to the people on the cruise, my mother was there as well. And I said, geez, we're so lucky. You know, I'm so grateful that I was born in this country. Absolutely love this country. I didn't always. There was a time when I was very angry at Australia, and it wasn't until I left and travelled all over the world that I went, oh, my goodness, I'm so lucky that I was born in Australia. I've come back with such a great love for the place. I'll just say that while I was there, we had like a virtual reality thing, you could like reenact the bombing of Darwin. And it was just so interesting to see the level of respect and mutual friendship that Darwin and Australia actually has with the Japanese, and how well respected the Japanese are here in Darwin. And I think that speaks volumes. So when we talk about division, if Australia and Japan can overcome their differences and become friends and have that mutual respect, surely Democrats and Republicans can. Surely the Labor Party and the Liberal Party can. Maybe even the Greens. Maybe. I'll try and keep a straight face. But, you know, I really feel like we should recognise that much of what we fight about and argue about is not that important. It is somewhat important, but we don't need to be so vicious towards each other. And please, please, please don't let Australia ever turn into what we're seeing in the United States.
Travis, your final thoughts?
I think the Swamp will be shitting their pants at the moment. Because have you ever played a sport where you cop a hit to the balls or something, like it hurts like hell, you get up and you got vengeance in your eyes, you're gunning for them. I think what's going to happen, they don't pick up the Senate. I think what?
I don't know what sort of sex life you've got.
So I've actually played sports, unlike you. No. So I think the US is going to get the Senate. I think they're going to get the House. They're going to get Trump, and they've already got the Supreme Court. So I think Trump is not going to pull punches when he wins. I think the CIA, the FBI, pretty much every single aspect of the Swamp is in severe danger. And he's not going to care what other people think because it's his final term. He doesn't have to get reelected. I think he's going to go in there with a sledgehammer. He's going to have some massive overhauls, like mass firings and criminal charges. So I'm really excited for America. And it's either going to go one of two ways. Either there's mass imprisonments or there's going to be civil war. And I hate to say it, it's one of those festering wounds where you got to cut out the bad flesh before you can fix it. And I think this is one of those things that should have happened years ago, and there was no president strong enough to actually do it. So that's just my thoughts.
Jarek, your thoughts?
A few days before the United States celebrated the 4th of July.
They did.
And of course, that is Independence Day for the Americans. And they find themselves, ironically, this many years later, fighting for their freedoms yet again. It's fascinating to see how the heart of the average American citizen is changing. If you know, the MAGA supporters we've heard from Shaquille saying we can now admit that we're Republicans again, as opposed to having to kind of avoid it in those awkward conversations. There's been a lot of talk saying this has woken up the normies, and I think the normies are waking up going, why are they adamantly out to get this guy? What is it about this guy that they just try to put him down? So hopefully a lot of good can come out of this situation, and it makes people question what's been going on for the last how many decades or even their lifetimes that needs to change in the United States. And I believe that it's going to have a global effect as people reconsider how they negotiate with the United States. Where does that put us politically, socially, economically? It's exciting times ahead.
Exciting times. I love the fact that you say that. And again, it's always great to see the old glasses as half full there. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's been part of the show online. This is a big, big thing. I always say it, and I'll never stop. This is so much about what Edge is about. We want to be interactive. We want to know your opinions. I'm personally very sick of the media, the corporate media, who's been telling us what to think for so many years. I want to hear from the everyday Aussie. So those who have come on board, really appreciate that. It is just absolutely wonderful. All right. While I scramble around
quickly, if you do want to listen to some awesome music, you can stream 24 hours a day on edgeradioaustralia.com. And if you want to actually build the wealth foundations, you can go to do Derek's courses at blueskyfactory.com.au. The link's in the chat already right outside of the show.
Absolutely.
Blue Sky.
It is the end of the show. It's been the Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia.
That's a first. He gets a compliment.